Ex-husband's unexpected visit to ex-wife's home sparks a shocking revelation. What's next? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The sound arrived before the man did. A sharp knock against the quiet of a suburban Sunday morning, the kind of quiet Emily Turner had grown to treasure. It echoed through the hallway, brittle and out of place, like a memory trying to claw its way back into the present. Emily's hand froze above the bowl of fresh apples she had just washed, cool droplets still sliding across her skin. For a heartbeat, she thought the knock belonged to a neighbor or a delivery mix-up. But something in the rhythm, too firm, too familiar, made her chest tighten. When she opened the door, the sunlight behind her stretched long across the porch, outlining a figure she had hoped never to see there again. Chad Miller stood with the same posture she remembered, shoulders squared, chin lifted slightly as if bracing himself against a world that hadn't yet decided whether to welcome him or reject him. His expression wasn't anger or regret, or even nostalgia. It was something quieter, something unreadable, like a sealed envelope bearing her name. Emily's breath thinned. Her first instinct wasn't fear, it was that old, buried exhaustion, the kind that comes from surviving too much disappointment over too many years. She didn't step back. She didn't invite him in. She just held the door, the frame cool against her fingertips, and waited. Chad's gaze flickered past her shoulder into the house she rebuilt alone. The soft cream walls, the warm oak floors, the small vase of daisies she bought each Saturday because she liked the way they made the room feel like morning even at night. He seemed to search for something there, but whatever it was, he didn't find it. Emily, he said finally, her name falling slower than the breeze lifting the edge of his jacket. She didn't answer. Silence became the air between them, tense, fragile, stretching as thin as glass. It was the same silence she had learned to master in the final years of their marriage, the silence that kept peace, cost her voice, and taught her how loud dignity could be without ever making a sound. A distant lawn mower hummed somewhere down the street. A dog barked. Life went on, unbothered by the weight standing at her doorway. Emily lifted her chin just a fraction, enough to show she wasn't the woman he once could rattle so easily. The morning light slid across her features, catching in her eyes like steel warmed by the sun. She watched him swallow once, the movement tight, almost reluctant. He hadn't come to reminisce. He hadn't come to apologize. Something else lived behind his hesitation, something she could sense but not yet name. His unexpected visit wasn't about the past. It was the beginning of something she didn't see coming, a shift, a truth, a revelation waiting just behind his careful breath. I was about to close the door, to end the moment before it could start, when Chad spoke again. Emily, I'm not here to make this harder for you, he said, his voice almost too careful, as if testing the waters before diving in. Emily didn't move. She didn't have to. The words hung in the air, suspended, like a threat she hadn't yet decided whether to accept or deny. I need to tell you something, he added, almost reluctantly. It wasn't a request, it wasn't a plea. It was simply a statement, heavy with unspoken promises. Emily took a breath, steadying herself. Her mind raced, thoughts tumbling over one another, trying to make sense of the situation. She hadn't seen him in almost 2 years. What could possibly be so urgent now? He hadn't even asked about her life, the small but significant changes that had happened since their separation. She felt the old bitterness stirring, how easily he could come back and expect to be part of her world again. But she pushed it aside, because there was no point in fighting it. He was here, and she was going to hear him out. The door still hung between them, but now, it wasn't an obstacle. It was a barrier that separated the woman she had become from the man she used to know. She stepped aside, allowing him to cross the threshold, but her eyes never left his. He walked past her into the living room, his steps deliberate, measured, as if the space had grown unfamiliar to him. He looked around briefly, as if searching for something, but didn't comment on anything. Emily closed the door gently behind him, her mind still racing. He settled on the couch, an awkward silence settling between them like an old acquaintance neither was particularly fond of. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice as steady as she could make it. "What is it, Chad? What's so important?" Her words were calm, but underneath, there was an edge that was only for him to understand. Chad looked at her, his gaze sharpening. "I found something," he said quietly. "Something that's going to change everything." Emily's heart skipped a beat. She knew that tone. It was the same tone he'd used when they first met, the one that told her he was about to make a decision, one that would either make them or break them. She felt the familiar tension crawl up her spine, her muscles tightening instinctively. What could he possibly have found that would make this visit so urgent? "I don't understand," Emily replied, her voice low, controlled. "What are you talking about?" Chad paused, his fingers drumming lightly on the arm of the couch as he gathered his thoughts. Emily could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him control the moment this time. "I found out who your father really was," Chad said, his words heavy with implication. The silence in the room deepened. Emily's blood ran cold. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her father? What did he mean? The man she had loved, the man she had trusted to keep her safe? What could possibly be so wrong about him that it would bring Chad here, after all this time? She felt a sudden surge of panic rise in her chest, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. She wasn't going to let Chad see her like this. Not now, not ever. "What did you find, Chad?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Her mind raced, the past crashing into the present. Had her father been hiding something all along? And why, after all these years, was Chad bringing this to her now? Emily's mind raced, her thoughts scattered like leaves in a storm. "What do you mean, Chad?" Her voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it felt as if the words were already too heavy for her to carry. She watched him closely, noting the tense set of his jaw, the tightness in his shoulders as if he were bracing for something. But what? Chad wasn't the type to come with cryptic messages, not unless he was sure of something, and right now, Emily had no idea what he could be sure of. "What exactly did you find?" she repeated, trying to steady herself. Her father had always been a mystery to her, but it was the kind of mystery that she had long stopped trying to solve. He was just her father, the man who had been there when she was growing up, but also the man who had left behind pieces of himself, pieces she never knew how to put together. Chad's gaze softened, just a fraction. "It's not just about him, Emily," he said. "It's about what he was involved in, what he did. It's about you, too." Her heart skipped a beat, and the room seemed to shrink around her. What could her father have been involved in that connected to her, to them? Chad continued, his words slow but deliberate. "I didn't want to believe it at first. But the more I looked into it, the more it all made sense. Your father wasn't just a regular businessman, Emily. He was involved in things that, if they came to light, could change everything." Emily felt the room tilt, the air thickening with the weight of his words. Her stomach twisted, the faint taste of panic creeping up her throat. "What are you talking about?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. She wasn't sure if she was asking Chad or if she was just trying to ask herself. Chad leaned forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Your father was involved in some kind of underground network. I don't know all the details yet, but I know enough to understand how deep this goes. And now, it's all connected to you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Emily's mind couldn't process what he had just said. She had known her father was a private man, but this was something entirely different, something far darker than she had ever imagined. "You're lying," she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. But even as she said it, she felt the truth in them. There was no way Chad would come here, after all this time, to tell her something like this unless he was sure. The realization hit her like a wave crashing against the shore, slow, inevitable, and far more dangerous than she had ever expected. Chad didn't argue, didn't try to convince her. He simply sat there, waiting for her to process it, for her to understand. And Emily knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The beginning of a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. The truth that was hiding in the shadows, waiting to unravel everything she thought she knew about her father, about herself, and about the life she had built since walking away from her past. Emily's mind was reeling, and for a long moment she couldn't find the words. Chad's revelation hung in the air between them, thick with implications. Her father, the man she had once admired, now seemed like a stranger to her. She had spent so many years trying to understand him, trying to make sense of his quiet, enigmatic nature, but this? This was something entirely different. Something that made her question everything she had known about her past. "I don't believe you," she finally managed to say, though even as she spoke, doubt crept into her voice. Could it really be true? Was this just another one of Chad's attempts to make her doubt herself, to pull her back into his world of confusion and hurt? But even as she asked herself these questions, something inside her stirred, a nagging feeling that there was more to this than just a story. She had seen enough of the world to know when someone was telling the truth, even if they didn't want to admit it. And Chad's expression, his eyes filled with that strange mix of concern and regret, told her that he wasn't lying. He wasn't here to hurt her. He was here because he thought she needed to know. "I never wanted to be the one to tell you this," Chad said, his voice quiet but firm. "But I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. Your father wasn't just a businessman, Emily. He was part of something much bigger. And it's not just about him. It's about what this means for you, for your future." The words hit her like a hammer, shattering the fragile sense of security she had built around herself. Her father's secret life, how deep did it go? What did it mean for her? Emily felt a chill creep up her spine. "What am I supposed to do with this?" she asked, the weight of his words settling in her chest like a stone. "How am I supposed to process this?" Chad leaned back in the chair, his hands clasped tightly together. "I don't have all the answers, Emily. But I know this, if you don't face it now, it will follow you. You'll have to live with the consequences, whether you like it or not." His words were a reminder that the past never really stays buried. It had a way of clawing its way to the surface, dragging all the things we'd hoped to leave behind right back into the light. Emily didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to process what she had just heard. Her father, a part of something dark, something she couldn't even begin to understand. It felt like a nightmare, but it wasn't one she could wake up from. She felt her pulse quicken as the realization sank in. This wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about her. About what her life would become once the truth came out. Chad stood up slowly, his expression serious. "I didn't come here to drag you into this," he said. "I came here because you need to know. And because I don't want to see you make the same mistakes I made." Emily stood still, her mind racing. She had always prided herself on being in control, on not letting anything shake her foundation. But this was different. She was standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground below her was crumbling. How could she face the truth about her father when she had no idea what that truth even was? The silence between them stretched on, thick with uncertainty. And in that silence, Emily knew one thing: there was no turning back. She was going to have to confront this, whether she was ready or not. The air in the room felt thick, heavy with the weight of secrets that Emily wasn't ready to face. Chad stood before her, his expression grave but not unkind. He had always been the type to avoid confrontation, to shy away from discomfort, but today was different. Today, he was here to push her into a reality she wasn't prepared for. "I don't want to push you, Emily," Chad said, his voice softer now, as if he sensed the turmoil inside her. "I just want you to understand that you can't ignore this. It's too big." Emily stared at him, her mind still struggling to process the information he had just laid at her feet. Her father, A man who had been her rock, her protector, the one constant in her life, was somehow tangled in a web of lies and deception, things she could barely comprehend. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, and every word Chad spoke only made the ground beneath her feet crumble further away. "How can you be so sure about all of this?" Emily asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "How do you know this isn't just some misunderstanding? Some mistake?" Chad looked at her, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I wish I could say it was a mistake," he replied. "I really do. But I've seen the evidence, Emily. I've seen the connections your father had with people who are dangerous. People who aren't just going to let this go." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Dangerous? Her father? The man who had always been so quiet, so careful with his words. She couldn't imagine it, couldn't picture him as part of some criminal organization or underground network. It didn't make sense. It didn't fit. "You don't know what this will do to me," Emily said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Her hands trembled at her sides, her fingers curling into fists to try and steady herself. "This isn't just about him. This is about everything I thought I knew about my life, my family. This is about everything falling apart." Chad stepped forward, his voice lowering even more. "I know this is hard, Emily. I know it feels like everything is falling apart. But the truth has a way of coming out, whether we want it to or not. And you need to be ready for it." Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had spent years building a life for herself, creating a sense of normalcy after the chaos of her childhood, and now it felt like all of it was slipping through her fingers. She had always believed that the past was something you could leave behind, something you could outrun, but now she realized how wrong she had been. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how fast you ran. "So what do I do now?" she asked, her voice small, her emotions rising like a tide she couldn't control. "What do I do with this information? How do I even begin to process it?" Chad didn't answer immediately. He just looked at her, his eyes filled with something that wasn't pity, but something softer, something that spoke of understanding, of knowing what it was like to have the ground pulled out from under you. "You take it one step at a time," he said finally. "You don't have to have all the answers today. But you do need to face it. You need to decide if you want to uncover the truth, no matter what it costs." Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She didn't know what the truth was, not really. But she knew one thing for certain: there was no going back now. The past was here, staring her in the face, and whether she was ready or not, it was time to confront it. Emily sat in silence, the weight of Chad's words still pressing down on her. She hadn't known what to expect when he walked through that door, but this was something entirely different from what she had imagined. Her father's past, his secrets, everything was unraveling before her eyes, and she wasn't sure how to stop it. She felt trapped, caught between the life she had built and the truth that was demanding to be acknowledged. Chad's words echoed in her mind, growing louder with every passing second. "You need to decide if you want to uncover the truth, no matter what it costs." But did she want to know the truth? Could she bear it? She had spent years protecting herself from the shadows of her past, pushing them away until they felt like nothing more than distant memories. But now they were here, standing in front of her, refusing to be ignored any longer. The silence stretched between them, thick with uncertainty. Chad hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on her, waiting for her to say something. He knew this wasn't easy for her. He knew that confronting her father's secrets was a blow she hadn't been prepared to take. But Emily had never been one to back down from a challenge. She had learned to face the storms in her life head-on, to survive the things that others would have crumbled under. So why did this feel different? She looked at Chad, her mind racing, but her words slow to form. "How far does this go?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How deep is my father involved in all of this?" Chad's eyes softened, but he didn't hesitate in answering. "I don't have all the answers, Emily. But I know this, it's bigger than you think. This isn't just about your father anymore. It's about everything he was connected to, everything that's been hidden for so long. Emily closed her eyes, the weight of his words settling on her chest like a heavy burden. She had always known her father was a complicated man, someone who had his secrets. But this was something she couldn't have prepared for. Her father was not just a man with a mysterious past. He was part of something far darker, far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "So what do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely audible, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Do I just accept that this is my reality now? That my whole life has been a lie?" Chad didn't answer right away. He took a step closer to her, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not saying you have to accept it, Emily. I'm saying you have to face it. You have to decide what kind of person you want to be in light of all of this." Emily's heart raced. She had always prided herself on knowing who she was, on having a clear sense of her identity. But now, that identity felt like it was slipping away from her, slipping into a shadowy place she couldn't reach. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I don't know if I can handle the truth." Chad's expression softened even further, his voice gentle. "You don't have to handle it alone. You don't have to do anything right now. But you need to start thinking about your next step. Because once you start digging, there's no turning back." Emily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had always been able to move forward, no matter what. But this was different. This was a truth that had the power to change everything, and she wasn't sure she was ready for it. But she knew one thing for certain: there was no going back now. The truth was already here, and whether she was ready or not, she would have to face it. It was only a matter of time. Emily sat quietly, her mind spinning with the information Chad had shared. It felt like the world she knew had been shattered, and now, all that was left were the jagged pieces of her past, scattered and disjointed. The weight of everything she had just learned about her father seemed unbearable. For years she had looked up to him, had trusted him more than anyone else. To think that he had been involved in something so dangerous, so secretive, it didn't feel real. But here she was, facing a reality that she couldn't deny, no matter how much she wanted to. The silence between her and Chad stretched out, a thick barrier that neither of them seemed willing to break. She knew he was waiting for her to say something, to acknowledge the truth he had forced her to confront. But she didn't have the words. There were no words for this. "I don't know where to start," she finally whispered, her voice hoarse with the weight of the revelation. Chad didn't respond at first. He just watched her, his expression unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that told her he understood. He understood what it was like to be hit with something so unexpected, so life-altering, that it left you feeling lost. "You don't have to have it all figured out right now," he said, his tone gentle. "But you need to start somewhere. Even if it's just asking questions." Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Questions. She had so many, and yet none of them seemed to make sense. Where did she even begin? Her father's secrets were like a tangled web, and each thread led to another mystery, another piece of the puzzle that she didn't know how to solve. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to ask," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Chad nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. "Start with what you know," he said. "What you know about your father. What you know about the people he was involved with. And then you can figure out what comes next." Emily nodded slowly, as if trying to absorb his words. She had spent so many years building a life without truly understanding her father, without asking the hard questions. But now, those questions were unavoidable. She would have to face them. She would have to face everything she had spent years avoiding. Her thoughts drifted to the days before everything changed, to the memories of her father's quiet demeanor, his constant presence in her life. She had never questioned his actions before, never asked why he kept so much to himself. But now, everything she thought she knew about him was being called into question. "How do I even start to understand all of this?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. How do I make sense of something like this? Chad looked at her for a long moment before answering. You take it one step at a time. You don't have to solve everything at once. But you have to start somewhere. You have to decide if you're ready to face the truth, no matter how hard it is. Emily felt the tears welling up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't ready to break down. Not yet. I don't know if I am ready, she whispered. But I know I can't keep running from this. I can't pretend like everything is fine anymore. Chad reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder in a gesture of comfort. You're stronger than you think, Emily, he said quietly. And you don't have to do this alone. I'm here for you. Emily took another deep breath, her resolve hardening. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. It was time to face it, no matter how terrifying it seemed. Emily stared at the floor, her mind whirling as she processed everything Chad had just told her. It was as though the foundation beneath her had cracked open, and now she was trying to make sense of the pieces. The truth, as painful as it was, had been laid bare in front of her, and there was no running from it. Her father had been involved in something that now seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the man she thought she knew. She had spent her life believing in his integrity, in his quiet strength, but now that image felt like a lie. Chad's words echoed in her mind. You have to decide if you're ready to face the truth, no matter how hard it is. Could she face it? Could she really dig into the past she had spent so many years trying to forget? She didn't know, but she understood that she couldn't keep ignoring it. The silence between them was suffocating, but it was necessary. Emily needed time to process, to understand what she was up against. She couldn't rush through this. The weight of it all was too much. After a long moment, she lifted her head and looked at Chad. He was still watching her, his face calm but his eyes filled with concern. It was clear that he wasn't expecting her to have all the answers, that he understood how difficult this was for her. But the truth was there, and it wasn't going away. I don't know where to even start, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. How do I find out more about this? How do I even begin to understand what my father was involved in? Chad hesitated for a moment, his hands clasped together in front of him. Start with what you can control, he said gently. Look at the people he was involved with. The connections he had. Dig into his past, into the people he trusted. They may hold the answers you need. Emily nodded slowly, though she didn't feel any more prepared than she had moments ago. The idea of looking into her father's past, of digging up the secrets he had kept from her, was terrifying. But what other choice did she have? If she didn't take this step, if she didn't confront the truth, then she would always be haunted by the unknown. She would never be able to move forward, not fully. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Okay, she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. I'll do it. I'll find out what I need to. No. Chad gave her a small nod, his expression softening. You don't have to do this alone, Emily, he said quietly. I'll help you. I'll be here, every step of the way. She looked at him, gratitude swelling in her chest despite the chaos swirling around her. She had spent so much time trying to handle everything on her own, trying to keep her distance from the past, but maybe now was the time to let someone else in. Maybe now was the time to accept that she didn't have to carry this burden alone. Emily stood up, her legs feeling shaky but her resolve firming up. I'll start tomorrow, she said, more to herself than to Chad. I'll start finding out what my father was really involved in. And I'll face whatever comes with it. Chad stood up as well, giving her a reassuring smile. I'm proud of you, he said. You've got this. Emily didn't feel brave. She didn't feel strong. But she knew that for better or worse, this was her path now. She couldn't turn back, and she wouldn't. The truth was waiting for her, and no matter how dark it was, she would have to face it. And she would. One step at a time. Emily woke up the next morning with a sense of determination she hadn't felt in a long time. The weight of the past was still pressing on her, but now, It felt like something she could handle. At least, she had to try. She had promised herself she would take the first step, and today would be that step. The sunlight filtered through her bedroom window, casting a warm glow on the walls, but it didn't reach her. Not fully. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, trying to shake off the lingering heaviness from yesterday. The conversation with Chad was still fresh in her mind, the uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. But she knew she couldn't back down. She couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. She couldn't keep running from the truth. She stood up and made her way to the kitchen, trying to gather her thoughts as she went through the familiar motions of making coffee. It felt like any other morning, but it wasn't. Today was different. Today, everything was about to change. Emily took a deep breath, holding the mug in her hands as she looked out the window. The world was still going on around her, unaware of the storm she was about to step into. But that didn't matter anymore. She couldn't change what had already been set in motion. She could only face it. She could only move forward. After a few moments, she set the mug down and grabbed her phone. She had made a list last night, writing down everything she knew about her father's past, everything she could remember about the people he had been connected to. It wasn't much, but it was a start. She had to trust that this was enough to begin. The first name on the list was someone she had heard of but never met. A business partner of her father's, someone who had always stayed in the background. Emily had never asked about him before, never thought to, but now, it felt crucial. She typed the name into the search engine and clicked through the results, her heart racing as she scrolled. There were a few articles, some public records, nothing too shocking at first. But then she found something, a news article from a few years ago, talking about a company scandal. It wasn't her father's name that was in the headline, but it was clear that this partner had been deeply involved in it. Emily's stomach dropped as she read through the article, the pieces starting to fall into place. Her father's name hadn't come up in the article, but the connections were there. The dots were starting to connect, and it was like she could feel the ground shifting beneath her feet. She didn't know if this was the answer she was looking for, but it was a sign, a hint that there was more to uncover. She needed more. She wasn't ready to dive deeper just yet, but the path was becoming clearer. The truth was there, just waiting for her to find it. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady herself. She had come this far, and she wasn't going to stop now. It was time to confront the past, to dig deeper, to uncover the secrets her father had kept hidden. She wasn't sure where it would lead her, but she knew one thing for sure, there was no turning back now.